Yes, we're filming. Hello everyone, I am Chava Peribán. This is Heritage Mezcal, and today we are here with Sophia Trapp, which is a dear friend. Sophia, may you care to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Salvador. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Sophia Trapp. I am living in San Miguel de Allende. I am an environmentalist, now a producer of 2 mezcals in a company called Agave, and have been living in Mexico for 25 years. Love being here. It definitely is the place in the world that belongs to me right now. And hi, everyone.
So, Sophia, I think that I want to start this conversation in the easiest of possible ways, which is how did we meet? Because I think it's actually like a really funny story of how we came to get to know each other. And the way I like to tell people about this is that, you know, even though mezcal and agave spirits are sort of a vast world, it's also very tiny space. And I guess like the fast answer to this, like we met over the internet because you guys were visiting some distilleries in Oaxaca, if I'm not mistaken, and you were trying to find something that sort of made sense, right?
Well, you're being very kind because in another way one could call it stalking. But
okay, I mean, I'm just trying to use like,
I know, that's very sweet of you. No, but what happened was we were with our project in San Miguel, and I, being an environmentalist and sustainability runs through my veins and regeneration, and I really started this mezcal project wanting to push the envelope. And what I hated when I was looking out and Googling and trying to find, let's say, the foremost thinkers in the space, sustainability was just, we use paper straws. That was the extent of it.
We plant one agave for every agave we harvest.
Exactly. Or, we replant, or we believe in Pachamama or something like that. And so when we were getting down to the technical details of building our distillery, I was determined to find someone Mexican on the ground who would speak the same language that I would in architecture and engineering. And so when I was in, of course, the first place you go for mezcal, all things mezcal, is Oaxaca. And I was looking around and I kept asking people, who recycles water? Who understands solar power? Who understands? And I finally got to that distillery, Sombra.
Correct. And big shout out for these kids. Love
yes,
them.
Big shout out to being the first. And I was super impressed. But again, because of COVID, I had to battle my way in. And they were so sweet to allow me. But I said, I came all the way from Guanajuato and I need to learn from the master distiller. Please, 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 please. And by the time I was there, I think for half an hour pleading, they finally let me in, and then they finally gave me your name. And then that's when the stalking began, where I really needed to find you. And luckily we met, and the rest is history.
Yes, and absolute disclaimer, we've worked together a lot. I had the privilege to help in the design of one day to be built distillery, maybe. And we've done, again, like a lot of work together. But I think that like the follow-up to this question for me, it's like that's sort of like a quick origin story. But the really important origin story that I think will be relevant is like why make agave spirits in Guanajuato and why using a land that had been historically abused to make this project. Like why there, how, like, yes, like why?
Why? Why was I looking for you? Yeah. Well, it's such a fascinating story. My family, we arrived in San Miguel de Allende in Guanajuato in 1999. So we are third generation cattle ranchers. And typically, having gone through 3 generations, we came from a very traditional way of raising cattle. In my lifetime, when I was in my 20s, I decided that I wanted to first get into architecture, then into land management. And then I really began to see the issues of desertification, and I got into restoration of ecosystems. And what was really interesting is I set off and created my own company, and I worked in China, Mongolia. My office was actually in London at the time. And I began to look at restoration of ecosystems after war and also in desertification. So when one of my main projects, for example, was in Inner Mongolia and in Mongolia, where the Kashmir goats had caused the complete desertification of the Mongolian scrubland. And all of a sudden, the sand was falling on Beijing, and Beijing said, we don't want the sand, fix it. And I was part of a large group of environmentalists, reforestation specialists, forestry specialists, government NGOs, where we had to all of a sudden stabilize the sand and try to reforest the desert.
Good Lord.
It was a huge undertaking. We're talking more than 1 million acres. You're looking at trying to bring together all these different group of people. And that literally became my specialty and my job over 25 years. And so when I finally took over the family farm in 2014, on one side, I had the family business, which was cattle ranching. But on the other, I had my passion, which was restoration of ecosystems. And so one could imagine in an older paradigm that would have really caused a problem of either or. And what was so interesting is a lot of work had been done in Africa and also in Asia at the time of how to use cattle and begin to manage them in a regenerative way with regenerative grazing patterns where you could all of a sudden use your cows to actually restore landscapes. And it added a whole new level to my expertise. And that it was also beautiful because Guanajuato, for many who don't know, is the cradle of the cowboy. The Marlboro Man originally comes from Guanajuato.
Really?
So when you're in Guanajuato, you figure out how you're going to cowboy or you aren't part of the conversation of the true local roots of what is their strength. So you have men on horses, you have people in the fields, you have great talent to grow, but as with all places around the world, the ecosystems the overgrazing began, the rain stopped. We began to have stresses on landscape through cattle that because the knowledge of regenerative grazing had not arrived to our part of Mexico, was destroying the land and wasn't restoring it.
So because I think that this is very interesting, and this is maybe, I mean, as much as people that probably listen to this show love Mezcal and they have like certain understanding of they probably stepped on rural Mexico, I think that cattle in the minds of people in a little place in the world, they like, we don't see that necessarily in our everyday lives, right? Like they're probably like breeding millions of cattle in these enclosed warehouses. And in Mexico, we still have a lot of what you could call like artisanal cattle grazing, with still when you're driving through the highways, you see these cattle like moving around all free, like eating a little bit here and a little bit there. But it's impressive how much damage can they cause to a landscape, right? Like if it's a little here and there, it's fine. It's once you size everything up and once you don't have land to roam on. The thing is that cattle are ruminant animals and they need to move. And the moving is actually what restores the health of it. But if you begin to corral them, or if you have more cows than land can sustain, I mean, that's the trick to everything is balance. But the thing is that in, let's say, developing nations around the world, the same in Mexico, livestock and cattle is an essential right. It is something that people are it's one of the few ways that very simple communities can get themselves out of poverty. And so it is something I believe that who are we to deny someone that ability? But the problem is that there's food missing. And if you're also have your herd, every true farmer and true cattle rancher would never want their animals to starve. The problem is if you're not feeding them enough, it's because you can't or you don't know how. So there we get to the second part of the story, is that we had land that was completely overgrazed. And we were lucky because we have a lot of land, and we took our numbers down so that the land itself
could actually hold the amount of cattle that we had.
And I'm sorry, like how do you even make that calculation? Like how do you know? I mean, I think like that's a critical part. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a cattle rancher type of thing where you begin to understand. And it's a rain calculation. It's a soil calculation. So in Guanajuato, you need about 35 hectares for one cow.
That's insanity, though.
It is insanity.
And that's the responsible way in which...
if they're free range. So that's why we have corrals, and that's why we have feedlots, because there is no way in nature. It's unlike, for example, if you're in Argentina, you have these praderas, you have these pastures, and then it's 1 hectare per cow. Wow. So you have good food, the amount of land that you need is less. Yeah. You have bad land with not very nutritious grass, you need way more land because you need the volume.
And I do have a question here. Has this land in this shape, as you're saying, like, is it bad land now because of this extensive overgrazing through the years?
So that's what happens. Semi-desert ecosystems are very fragile. And desert ecosystems are, but, it was semi-desert is the worst because you normally have half a year rain and then you have half a year not, or you have a quarter year rain. Let's say you have 5 centimeters, 11 centimeters. Certain areas that know how to grow food, they get 4 centimeters and they know how to grow food with that. But it's so fragile. And if you don't react, you can break it. And what's interesting about the difference between, let's say, a tropical forest like the Amazon, yes, you can cut it down. But because of the rain, it's easier to regenerate. You can put plants in and the rain will just help you and it's easier to begin to get going again.
Got it.
In the semi-desert, if all of a sudden your water patterns go against you and you've lost your microorganisms because literally the sun has cooked the soil and there's no protection and you've lost your microorganisms, even if you left it alone, it will never come back.
Okay, and that's what happened to you. So I guess what we're saying is you are in the worst possible case scenario, and that's why you started working.
No, there's even worse than me.
Okay, well.
There's worse than me. I have the luxury of 20 centimeters of rain, although we used to have 25 centimeters of rain 25 years ago. And I would say about 10 years ago, we began to go to 19 to 15. And the last 3 years, we have 11. But if I would speak to someone in the Thar Desert of India, they would be like, oh, lucky you. And there is worse. But the fact is that that's not the point. The point is that once an ecosystem breaks or once an ecosystem has lost its life force, in which I would say, therefore, the microorganisms, the fungals, the bacterias that you need in the soil, even when a bird comes and drops a seed on that land, it cannot germinate because it doesn't have the corresponding organisms in the soil to begin to germinate.
And I think this was like really what sparked, I think, the next part of the project you're going to tell me about. Because again, like you don't have a friendly house, like a friendly space for nature to take its own path. And I think that's the dream, right? Like the dream is in order to make an environment, to make a soil, to make a landscape that can move by itself if things get a little bit difficult. And how you solve this? Like how do you create such a situation?
Well, when you see your animals not being able to eat, or when all of a sudden you're forced to say, oh, I need to go buy alfalfa, but yet we're a certified organic ranch, so we are an island, and there is no way that I can go buy food because there is no one around me that produces organic alfalfa feed, rastrojo, the corn, nothing. So I had to solve it on site, or we couldn't have cattle. And the thing is, there's this beautiful wisdom that I was given along my journeys through the world, where they said every ecosystem has the food and the medicine that you need. So when we, for example, sit in Mexico and decide I really need ashwagandha from India, I'm not saying don't, but the philosophy is that there's a similar plant in Mexico like ashwagandha that fulfills the same purpose. So every ecosystem, whether it's the ocean or the jungle or the desert, has food, has sugar, has nutrition. You just need to learn to find it. So thus began a real period of observation where I was looking at every plant and saying which thrives here. And it was interesting because, of course, being in Guanajuato, you look at first the paddle cactus, the nopal, because that's ubiquitous. Even humans already eat it. And it was so interesting. We had 3 bad years, and I saw the nopal was eating itself. It was disappearing. It was dying.
Really? Because I always thought nopales were invincible. Like, if you tell me, like, I've seen nopales in situations where, like, that's...
So when a nopal has grown up in the desert, it already knows how to live on 1 centimeter.
Got it.
Okay. But when you have a nopal that's used to 25 centimeter, it hasn't adjusted to 11.
So it's a fresa nopal.
I guess
it's a posh
that's
nopal
for you
there,
to see. But it's out of balance with its ecosystem. It hasn't learned to adjust to hold more. So it held less, and then it didn't have, and it would begin. It was really interesting. You could see them wilt, weep. I had never seen anything like that. And even the farmers and the cowboys with whom I work, they're like, Senora, no, this never happened. But what did I see? In all of that, in all the destruction, and all the sadness, and all the weepiness, there was the agave standing tall, saying, bring it on, come on, is this all you got? I want more. And so I was like, wow, that is the keystone species. That is the foundational species. And I didn't really know a lot about it. You know, I knew that tequila existed. I knew mezcal existed. So I set out to really, as a biologist and a botanist and a landscape architect, I set out to really study the agave. And I came upon its superpower, which is why I understood in the end why it survives, is that it opens its stomata at night, and it can take the water from the nighttime air. And when you see that is what a lot of the architects around the world are trying to do, is to capture the dew of the morning, to then filter in to give drinking water to people who don't have wells. This is the agave doing it. So when you are looking for the only moist areas in the desert, it is at the root system of the agave. Its whole essence is about capturing water, storing water, and entering it into the soil. And when you're someone like me who's looking for that partner, it was just like, wow. So we are going to center everything around this.
I just love that you called agave a partner.
Yeah.
Like that's true love right there. Yeah. I think but it's impressive that, again, like, there's a reason why historically agave has been so relevant in Mexico, and to be honest, like in a good part of the Americas.
Yes.
And I think that it has to do with that point that you're making, that I'm sure that other civilizations looked around themselves at difficult times. What is the only thing holding strong right now against everything that's going wrong? Agave. Agave is there for us.
Well, I think when you grow up like we do with running water and everything at your beck and call in supermarkets, when I was in Guatemala, I will never forget, there was a lady who was showing me her garden, and she was saying, eso es el agave, this is the agave, es el árbol de maravillas, it's the tree of wonder. And for me, being a precocious 25, I was like, yeah. That's a great exaggeration, etc. And she really insisted to tell me, no, our clothes come from there. You know, the fibers, our rugs come from there.
Medicine,
but she never
architectural.
spoke about food, and she never spoke about how it was. I mean, that I only discovered then 5 years ago about how it truly was the anchor of the whole ecosystem.
And it was like, I mean, I was interviewing Marcela, who claims there's been 10,000 years of a close relationship between agaves and humans.
Yep.
And at many points, they were
Yep.
a significant part of diets of whole cultures. Yep. People will be carrying agaves from one region to the other on their backs when they were moving. So we're talking about something that has been relevant. I mean, and she was saying, like, think about how many other plants have gods dedicated to them in Mexico.
True. True.
Like just to think about how this was so incredibly important.
Yep.
They had to build a mythology around, well, they decided to build a mythology around it. Really tells you how important was the knowledge linked to that they made sure that that wouldn't be lost.
Yes, that the knowledge would go on.
Because it was divine.
Yeah.
So anyways, like all of these things, it's so interesting for me that made sense to you, like by looking around difficult times, which I think it's not that different to what happened back 10,000 years ago.
Well, if you look at the history, and what's interesting is the sugars that it contains, etc. I think that you really can see. Well, I'm a big believer in the macro-micro, the E.F. Schumacher, small is beautiful. And whatever is in your ecosystem is what's in your gut. And what's in your gut is a direct reflection of what's in your soil. That those two are incredibly linked.
Absolutely, yes.
And so if your soil is desertified, how can you actually have a healthy gut?
That's amazing. Like that's how, like all the products you're consuming, they're weak. I mean,
exactly, or they're making you weak. But then we are also, the soil being the soil, weak cannot give you what you need to have a strong gut. And what's interesting about the agave, and I would say the most revolutionary thing, is that when you are looking at desert, and yes, desert absolutely has its life. Absolutely. It's hidden often and it's harder to see. But what I saw about the agave, and that's where I begin to buy into the history and the emotion and the godlike essence of it, is that it jumpstarts life. And I mean, to witness that, where we'll get into the planting system, but if I plant an agave and then it provides the moisture. And if I can help by transferring original microorganisms from a healthy part of the forest or a healthy part of the nature reserve, and then join that up with the water abundance of the agave, all of a sudden you've created a micro ecosystem that can begin to germinate and can begin to be a seed, and it can begin to grow. And when you have enough agaves, then those ecosystems begin to join up, and it just grows and grows and grows. So you restore the soil. And what I have seen is miraculous, because now when the bird brings the seed and puts the seed next to the agave, where the microorganisms are there and where the beneficial fungals are, all of a sudden the tree grows. It germinates, it becomes alive, and no one needed to plant it.
So, I think we usually use certain terms that can be confusing, that could be probably not used in everyday life. And I think like this term regenerative agriculture might be confusing to some, but what you just said, I think synthesizes to perfection what we are referring to when we're saying regenerative agriculture, which is just basically creating homes for like new homes or recent homes for nature to flourish in places that wouldn't be able to sustain that. So I think this is a wonderful, beautiful explanation, having agave as the main actor.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I would posit that in any ecosystem, you would find that keystone species. Agave doesn't need to be the answer for everybody, but where I live in Guanajuato represents 60% of Mexico. It represents 35% of America. It represents 40% of the Earth's surface is like where I live.
Okay, like the type of ecosystem that you have.
Yeah, the type of ecosystem that I have. Those are the numbers.
That's
and so, of course, if you're trying to restore a jungle, or if you're trying to restore the tundra, you're going to look for different keystone species, but the philosophy is the same.
Well, I have to tell you that there's agave in Utah.
I do know that.
Okay, so I'm just saying, maybe.
But agave is incredible, because once you begin to study the amount of species, the amount of adaptation, I mean, honestly, at this point where I've been studying it intensively for 10 years, if you told me it could grow in the moon, I would believe you.
Let's not.
I'm just saying.
Let's
I
just
would be
search
open. No, but I would be open to considering it with what I've seen. The strength that it has is just amazing. But again, that was a romantic notion.
No. And I'm happy to imagine that. Like again, like I just like, can we have agaves growing in the moon? I'll be happy to see that. I want to try that spirit. Hell yes.
Well, because we would want to try because we'd want mezcal on the moon, right?
That's all I'm saying.
That's
yes.
what we would want.
Absolutely,
so
yes.
We'd be open to trying.
A few glasses of wine, but majorly mezcal, please. But I mean, like, I'm loving this so much
funny.
because I love that we're talking about a romance that you had with agave, and it was a means to recover a land that you saw was in great fragility. And what you're saying, like, when you see your animals not having a chance to survive and eat with what you have at hand, I'm sure for a cow rancher, it has to be traumatic, to say the least. And what I love about all of these conversations, we haven't talked about spirits at all. Like you're thinking about agave for all the beneficial things that it can do for your land, but one day this agave is going to die. And you didn't have plans for it. You were just like, you were just like, this agave is doing everything for me. That's it. But you never thought about actually using the agave for something.
Well, that's what's interesting is when you're a landscape architect, and if you haven't really dealt with succulents, you plant oak trees 300 years, you plant mesquite, and that's another 200 or 800 years. Like, as a landscape architect, it's very rare that you deal with end of life because you have annuals and then perennials, but it's kind of, there's seasons, but you do know things die, but when you're planting forests, it's very rare that you're around for that part.
That's fascinating. I had never thought about that. That's true.
Yeah, it's totally true.
Yeah.
And so I set out to plant like I always did. And one little part of the story that we missed was just to kind of pull it together, was that initially I planted the agaves was in order to have food for my cattle. And that was the part where I found, it was so funny when I went to my cowboys and I said, okay, we're now going to do agaves instead of nopal, because we always use nopal for the cows. But then they were dying. And so I was like, we're going to use agave. And then finally the stories came out of the communities. Oh, my grandfather used to use it when times were really tough. But my grandmother or my aunt, she used to cut it up and leave it for the cows.
But just to, like a precision there, are we talking, and I know the answer, but just like,
I
want the precision. Are you talking about the penca, the cooked agave? Like what part of the agave are we talking?
What they would do when times were really rough, and believe you me, when they're rough in the desert, you'll eat anything. So what they did was they took the penca and they just with a machete, lo picaron, no? They put it in cubes and they just sliced it and left it. And when there's nothing else to eat, you eat it. But there's a thing in the agave, I would say its self-defense mechanism are the saponins, and they are very aggressive. And so, and for a cow, you need to hit the agave at just the right point, because if the sun dries it out, it's done. Like you've lost, an agave has 70% water. And so when you give an agave, you're giving water as well. That's the genius of it. You give water, and it has these micro, macro mineral profiles that are fantastic, but it also is green. So it has the chlorophyll that you want them to have when there's just dried out pasture everywhere. That's just calories. You want them to have something that sustains them.
Well, to be honest, like cattle nutrition is not my expertise at all. So
but let's just say you want veggies, you want something green.
I mean, today I was looking at a poster in the street and said like 500 scientists work in the nutrition of the little food for dogs, right?
Yeah.
So
no, it's a highly specialized part. But
yes.
So the thing was, there was an engineer, and you can't just use a normal wood chipper. So funnily enough, this project emerged from a lot of people having the same problem that I was having. And I saw that everyone solved a part. So I found an engineer in Querétaro who had actually made the shredder for the agave penca. Because if you use a wood chipper, it's done. It's so long and you need something strong enough. So he solved the chipping problem, or the shredding problem. though he didn't know about the fermentation. So there was another person that said, well, the saponins, if we ferment it, but he was putting it in garbage bags. And for me, that was not like for his chickens. But I was like, whoa, if I could level this up for my cows, all of a sudden I could have food, and food without end. Like,
and water.
And
mineral,
mineral profile. And just basically, it was going to be, for me, the solution instead of alfalfa. Even better. And when you know that that is the largest cause of water drawdown in any semi-desert area of Mexico is the alfalfa, the fact that with one fell swoop, you could turn around and have agave fill in for that. It won't fill in for everything, but it fills in a really good, juicy part.
It's a good subsidy.
Yeah.
I mean, really,
Yeah.
the tree of marbles.
Yeah.
Like, if you
No,
ask
that's
me.
it. So we figured out how to level that up for our cow. We have 800 cows, and we figured out how to level that up. I couldn't do, 2,000 garbage bags. So we found these barrels. We figured out a one-way valve system, and we began to ferment.
So I like, just because this show is dedicated, like fermentation is a big part of what we talk in this show. And again, like, it's interesting to me, again, like a little bit counterintuitive just because of my brain, how it works. Fermentation for me, it's only to make delicious alcohol. But here you're talking about fermentation in a way that I think it's more linked to, say, like kimchi or a lot of the fermented food that has been implemented around the world. Fermentation does have other capacities. It can be used to create other results. So how would you describe why fermenting the penca was critical in order? I mean, you've sort of touched on that a little bit.
Well, it was about transforming the saponins and the sugars, and in a certain sense, creating an atmosphere where you do have bacteria. And I now call my cows kombucha cows because basically instead of making mezcal, we make kombucha. And your fermentation results depend on how you ferment. So we created a non-oxygen area, so it couldn't pudrir, how you say, how
like it couldn't rot.
It couldn't rot, but you open it up and it has this amazing alive smell. And if you're a cow in the desert and you're, a ruminant animal, bacteria, wet, feed, full of microbes is what you want.
So you described like the ultimate menu for the cattle in the desert.
Yeah.
Those are the attributes that they're looking for, and that's what they call delicious.
Real food and green food and juicy food. And then in order for us, we added, and the magic of agave versus nopal, agave has 4% protein. Nopal has pure sugars, and agave has sugars but has 4% protein. So then if I want to add other protein, I had to look again in the desert and find whatever else was there for protein. We use native sunflowers for that. But it's about seeing what you have. But so coming back to your other question, so there we were, and all of a sudden a scientist came because we actually also started looking into carbon sequestration. And when I saw the agaves, how much they were absorbing, we invited scientists down from New York City to begin to measure the carbon sequestration potential of the agaves, of the Salmiana agave. And we did 3 types. We did an Americana, 2 Salmianas, and a Mapisaga, so 4. And what was amazing is we found out, and I did this in conjunction with Ronnie Cummins from the Organic Consumer Society and Via Organica, also in San Miguel. And we shared that project where we discovered that 1 hectare of agave planted at a density rate of 1,800 agaves per hectare could absorb 95 tons of carbon over 10 years.
Wow. And that's, I mean...
And that's not including the forest that comes after.
So that is what it's meant to
just
suggest.
From a bare piece of land with just 1,800 agaves, you've sequestered 95 tons.
So I do want to point out something that I think is really important here, that is for you, and this is what I understand from how you're planning this, and I might be making things up, but I'm pretty sure I'm not.
See?
It's that you are seeing agave as a temporary ally. Your ultimate objective is to bring back nature at its full bloom and its full glory using agave as a starter. So when you're saying, or you're talking about the sequestration potential of agave, you're not saying we're just going to have these farms of agave and like that's going to be the end it all. What we're doing is like, while we're getting to a forest that it's actually going to be the full machinery, full steam of consuming carbon, we're still getting something out of for our bucks, right? Like,
well, yes and no. I would say the beauty of the agave, or what I discovered, is in the end, it's like with the cattle, it's all about the management of the agaves. So as we in San Miguel de Allende, our main focus is we are a nature reserve. So of course, my management system, or why I set out to use the agaves and how I'm managing the cows, is to restore the original ecosystems of the land. So I'm managing them very specifically with that in mind,
that purpose.
That I want the shrubland to grow and I want the trees to come back. And you begin, there's in ecosystem restoration, you jumpstart a natural succession. So succession means you start with grass, then you're lucky with some flowers, then some shrubs, then some thorns, then some succulents, and you know you've hit the apex when you have your mesquite or your oak tree. So you start with small trees, end up with large trees, and that would be us having done our work well. But what I discovered while I was planting the agave, and I started doing a couple different pilot projects, because I started to see all of a sudden how this could be relevant for the agave industry. What I began to do is plant the agaves and manage them in different ways so that you could restore the soil, but you don't have to restore the forest.
Okay, that's fascinating. So, I mean, okay, yes,
Yeah.
I want to hear more about this because
now we're getting into the
because not everybody has a nature reserve that they want to bring back. There's farmers that want to dedicate their lives and their children's lives to the cultivation and for their production of agave. So
no, and to live like a farmer himself.
Yes.
What's so cool is we discovered, for example, in Guanajuato can grow pecan trees, but they take a lot of water. So I set out to do a pilot project where I did a row of agaves, a row of pecans, then I left 10 meters for milpa, a row of agaves, a row of pecans, 10 meters for milpa. Because I really believe that the future of the farm is that you need to try and figure out how you're going to do two or three different things with each hectare. Single monoculture doesn't work. It's expensive. It's not in balance. You're constantly fighting nature. So when I tell you that the way we began to plant our agaves was in order to capture the rainwater, and how we do that is we plant the agaves on berms on key line. So when any drop falls, those 11 centimeters that I now have, we capture and store all of it. And so it doesn't cross our land for 24 hours. It stays for 10 months.
So I feel like if I understand correctly, this the keyline berm system, what it allows it, you create a sponge instead of water running away as it used to. And you're able to fix, so you have like a double fixation system in a capacity. You have the agave, and then when it really rains, like the agave is just working the whole time. It's your workhorse that is always there. But when it does happen to rain, you have these ways of carving the land in order to keep as much as that water as you can possibly preserve. And
so what you want to do is you want to begin to capture it all. And in the desert, you never want to have presas that just evaporate everything. What you want to do is you want to grab it and you want to put it in the soil and you want to put it down to the bedrock, and then it should begin to continue to flow underneath the soil in that layer between the bedrock and the soil. Then any root system that is in the surface can go down and drink from it over the whole time.
That is such a critical difference of a lot of the things that I have ever thought.
Yeah.
Because yes, like if you leave exposed water in a place where sun, it's intense, you're losing so much on an everyday basis. So you have to hide that water.
Yeah. And so where do you hide it is in the ground.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I had never fully thought about that. Just like that tiny little critical thing.
So what you want to do, and that's what they do in Israel, it's what they do in India, anybody who is trying to farm in the desert with 1 to 4 centimeters of rain, you normally sculpt the land to capture as much, and then you sink it. And then what you do is you start with those kind of plants to bring shade, but again, that's how you get your microorganisms, and you maximize every drop. And if you look at older cultures, like the Persians having their underground canals, you would never have because it would all be evaporated by the time it got 15 miles down the...
Great for solar panels, not great
for water. So you're trying to always put that underground. So what we did was, I almost see it as the yin and yang of reforestation. Your yang, for example, is your form. So what we're doing, and I see it almost as bones. If you have this piece of land that's completely flat, what you're doing is carving out almost these bones. I make these berms every 7 meters, but it depends on the management. I'll make them every 10 meters, or I'll make them how they need to be. And that's your form. So you create those berms to capture whatever water does fall. Then what we're doing is combining with the yin, which is you put the agaves on, and then you put the microbes in. And with that's the invisible part that begins the life. And once you have water and microbes together, and there's a couple little other secret sauce things in there, biochar and other things that you can imagine. We use compost teas. Like, we're always just trying to bring life in there.
But everything you have described, at least in my mind, it's very attainable for farmers around Mexico. You haven't described anything that it's...
No, it's all supposed to be accessible. Literally in the farm, if it's expensive, then only first world can ever access it. Honestly, also simplicity is the hardest to get to. But when you get to it, you know it's right. Because it's just truth. It works. You don't need to make it work. It just works. And the idea is to have this self-sustaining, constantly life-giving system. And that is the definition of regenerative, where every year it's a little bit better. Where every year, when we start with we started with 4 species of grass. Now we have 16, and they came by themselves. I didn't need to grass it. I didn't need to buy seeds. You begin to put life back, then the bugs come back, then the birds come back, then the bunny rabbits come back, then the deer come back, and then if you're lucky, your apex predator comes back.
So I remember the first time I went to your farm in Cañada de la Virgen, I remember there was a certain amount of insects, and we were driving through, the farm at a certain speed. And this year, when I came back, I was almost lost my sight. The amount of insects that were flying around.
Yeah.
I went the same season almost, and it was just incredible to see firsthand what you are describing.
Yeah.
So I've experienced it in the flesh, and maybe I will prefer to have less flying entities around.
Well, I'll get you a face mask next
Please do,
time.
yeah.
It's good protein. You just open your mouth.
I mean, I love to eat bugs for sure, yes, but I don't know, when there's speed involved and stuff, it gets a little bit tricky. Yeah. So I do have we're going to jump into spirits in a second, but I do want to ask a last question in this direction, because we're talking about cattle nutrition, and you are describing all of these different types of grass. You're talking about the fermentation. In the end, the cattle, I'm sure you got a lot of pushback from people around you saying oh, those cattle are going to be weak. They're not going to develop any muscle. They're going to taste bad. Well, I don't know how people were probably pushing back, but what has been the effect in the cattle's constitution, if you wish?
Yeah, well, I think change, as cattle ranchers, we're very conservative by nature. I definitely have that other side to me. So I totally understand when people I've been doing this for 30 years and I'm fine. I don't need to change. The problem is that when it's decided for you, when the rains don't come, and you don't have the money, you got to solve it somehow.
Yeah, you're doing this for 30 years, just not in these conditions.
Well, this is it. And so I didn't want to change either, but there's a certain moment that you change or die, or everyone dies, or whatever is going on. And so I think that's the positive out of everything that's been happening, I would say. But yeah, there's still to this day a lot of suspicion. Like, if it was as great as you say it is, then why don't we know about it already? Well, I'm telling you about it. Yeah, but someone else. Like, why didn't someone else tell us about it? And I think that that's okay. There's always a first mover, then there's second movers, and there's third movers. And in the end, necessity breeds this opportunity. And it's very funny because, at least in my neck of the woods, everybody's always looking over the fence and they say, oh, senora, next year you'll go bankrupt and then we'll be right. And I unfortunately, I never go bankrupt. And so that, for them, so 7 years later, they're like, okay. And when it was really bad this year, and it was interesting, that was the first time they didn't just look over the fence, they crossed the fence and said, you know that agave thing you were talking about? Can you tell me that again? And so all of a sudden, we're starting to organize.
Because what I can say firsthand as well is that the meat that is coming, the steak and the meat and the products that are coming out of your farm, they are delicious stuff. Like, I think that living in Mexico City, we don't necessarily have the best steak available in the world. It just tends to be like a little bit flavorless for my palate. Every time I go and eat the stuff in your farm, hell, like, I'm just a very, very happy camper. It's just like full of flavor. And yes, I think...
Well, how can it not be? Because if you feed someone properly, an animal properly, it does translate into the flesh or into the animal. And no, we love it because right now on all our bags, we sell our grass-fed organic beef nationwide here in Mexico. And we just made a new sticker for it. It's called agave finished beef, so that we're kind of highlighting the fact that we are feeding it this incredibly succulent, delicious, nutritious, also sustainable, regenerative meal. And it is having a difference.
I would love to do a tasting where you have like grass finished, you have like, industrial stuff
and cow.
We have to do that tasting.
Finished,
I would love to do that.
So getting back to yours, where all of a sudden, so there we were, and I'm this very practical farmer. I don't like waste at all. And so and it was the carbon scientist that said, okay, Sophia, so we can credit you for 95 tons a hectare. But what are you going to do when they die? And I was just going, oh my God, what do you mean when they die? And I said, I hadn't even thought. I just was so focused on planting them and getting them growing to feed and nourish. And he said, yeah, well, if you don't do something with them, they're going to oxidize and your whole 95 tons goes right back into the environment. And I went, no, like it's all for nothing, all of this. And so I had to, all of a sudden I was like, okay, what am I going to do with them? Now they could all go in the cow, obviously. And that's the amazing thing about once you get to the heart, the cow loves it even more because that's where the sugar all is. But then I was going, typical me, because we were a cowboy country, I was like, oh, well, let's make lassos or let's make hats or sisal carpets on Fifth Avenue. Let's go there. And then that was where, and it's so nuts, that I've lived in Guanajuato for 25 years. 25 years. And this was 2000. No one had spoken to me about mezcal in Guanajuato.
You have the wrong friends.
I totally do. No, and also I was having young children and family, and I wasn't drinking as much. No, but even so, you're in San Miguel where all the tourists are coming, etc. You go into any bar and it's Jose Cuervo, tequila, it's Bacardi. Like, just even the nature of the bar system here does not encourage you to look beyond whatever's being offered. Yeah. And mezcal was Oaxaca. Of course, I went several times to Oaxaca to have mezcal. Of course, I went to Jalisco and had tequila. And I had several friends, who did me the honor of giving me their best tequila, etc. But it was very interesting, and I totally understood this after my journey. But I said, well, I didn't want to do a Disneyland thing, but I said, if Guanajuato mezcal is a thing, And if it's such deep culture here, and if I actually, when I was breastfeeding my children, etc., of course I drank aguamiel. And of course I understood when Corona came in and took out pulque, by saying, sophisticated people drink beer.
Well, no, they literally said they were putting shit in the fermentation tanks. I mean, they were not subtle at all. They were nuclear in them.
Well, that's the way you get your market share. Yes. Fear works. So the whole point was and sophisticated people get things in bottles. Like it's a sign of wealth as well. And so it was only when I had my children that I even knew about the aguamiel in the market, and I would go in the morning and get my shot to have better breast milk, etc. So somewhere the pieces were coming together. But then I went to I was like, okay, so there is this amazing state, this amazing desert, and I've actually never really gone out into it. And I love making new friends. So I went out, and because Cañada de la Virgen is a very respected cattle ranch, having been there 25 years, we have our reputation. Our meat had its reputation. So I do believe it was very different that when I knocked on Hacienda doors and said, hi, my name is Sophia and I'm from Cañada la Virgen, there was mutual respect. I wasn't someone that came from a different planet or that came from a different, let's say, work, that we could find something in common.
Absolutely.
Because in Guanajuato, I would say still to this day, there's huge fear in exposing one's roots with mezcal because there was so much persecution for it. And so there's a huge lack of trust, huge. And the Guanajuato state up till today, it's changing, thank goodness, but hadn't really put a lot of pride and emphasis in the beauty of this as something to be proud of in Guanajuato. They hadn't put any attention. You couldn't find us internationally anywhere. And so everything was the vineyards. And so I knocked on my first door and I said, listen, I'm this crazy person. I have these amazing agaves. I tell you, my agaves being regenerative and alive, and I haven't put them on steroids or fertilize them in any way. I really believe that if you could begin to invite me in to learn about distillation, I think we could make something really beautiful together.
And on that note, let's get a little mezcalito.
Oh, I love that.
I think that is.
I know, my it's all a little dry.
I think this is the right moment to serve something.
To lubricate. We've done the serious stuff. Now let's get to the really serious stuff.
Yeah, well, I think in a previous conversation we had, you were referring to mezcal as your sexy black dress.
That's what I was about.
And
yeah, let's put on the dress. No, but what was so funny is when you're an environmentalist like I am and have done all this work internationally, I tell you, I've never raised a single dollar for reforestation. The moment I turned around and began to ask people, would they like to invest in a new regenerative mezcal, the checks wouldn't stop flowing.
Cheers for that. Cheers for that. Yes.
That's why.
We're having one of your labels at Scene, which is incredibly beautiful. Hell yes.
So this is
a treat.
A 46%. And it is because we don't have the DO of mezcal in San Miguel de Allende, technically we're an agave spirit.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, we love it because, as you can tell a little from my character, I love to break all the rules. And once I saw the rules to be a mezcal, I was like, no, sorry, I don't want to.
I don't care about following the for-all. Hell to this notion of understanding methanol.
I just want deliciousness.
Yes.
No?
Yes, that's the most...
I want it to be delicious, and I want to be free to just get creative. And as I am coming out from outside the box, I can't pretend to be 4th generation or 20th generation of anything. I thought, why not lean into that instead of seeing it as a negative? And what was amazing is that us being Guanajuato, I also leaned into, as we have a nature reserve, I can't put a non-endemic species in the nature reserve. So the Salmiana Blanco, which is Latin Salmiana salmiana, or the Salmiana crassispina, those are the two that basically make up everything. And of course, you have the Mapisaga, which is a pulquero, And I have some at 12 years. I need to wait another 6 years but I can't wait to play with those. And we have an Americana, but mostly I focused on the Salmianas.
I mean, I love that. I mean, people that listen to me or that have seen what I got to say, I always say that Salmiana is a new Karwinski.
Yeah.
And I am so in love with it. So I am incredibly happy to have access to more pristine, beautiful Salmianas.
Yeah.
Which to be very honest, I think that's one of the huge advantages of El Bajío, because I like to think of Guanajuato, San Luis Potosí, Zacatecas. Again, like we haven't talked enough about this region, I think, in the industry. And it has one of the most incredible histories. They were making incredible volumes of these spirits forever. But also, I mean, you've shown me pictures of forests of quiotes. You've shown me stuff like it's how pristine the agaves are in that region is just to die for. And I think that gets translated into these flavors that it happens to me so often when I'm doing blind tastings. If there is some Salmianas on the table, people are always like, what the hell is that? What just happened to me? You know, like they always react strongly to it. It's not something that just like passes through without...
Well, you and I have had hours of conversations because I think there's like a yin and yang here thing too, from the two different sides that we're coming at, you know, you from industry, me from farming and soil, is that you can have a Salmiana in Oaxaca and it tastes totally different. And I think what people are beginning to appreciate is Guanajuato's pure minerals. There's a reason why the mines are there. You drop a shovel and there's copper or there's iron I mean, even uranium. I wonder how that would taste, you know, as a terroir.
I will not engage you with that.
But I am telling you, I mean, it oozes minerality. So then what we're doing is beginning to have that conversation. I would say if I were an expert in any part of the mezcal business is in agave and soil. And so that's where I enter into. And then I look for the collaboration that allows me to I mean, I will never learn to distill in my lifetime the way a master distiller would. And I also believe it's a fallacy that one needs to know everything. And I love when you can get the right collaboration going, where you have distillation fascinates me. It's an alchemical process that literally in science hardly makes any sense. And it's art. And
the whole cycle, you know,
it's
like
a spirit.
From harvesting, fermentation, like harvesting, cooking, fermenting, and distilling as a unit. I think that's, you know, I respect piano players and ballet dancers. I think this is way beyond this is like singing and dancing, like those people that have like the instruments and they're singing and dancing and doing the whole time at the same time. The harvester, fermenter, distiller, calibrator of the spirits is doing so many things that it's impressive for one human to have all of that knowledge under their belt. And you chose, I mean, from the vast number of people you could have decided to collaborate with, you decided to collaborate with some of my favorite rock stars, which is Daniel Navarro at Palmar Segundo, who happened to distill with the Campanilla system. Which, I mean, it's the first time I tried their stuff, my mind blew. And when I visited the first time their distillery or their palenque...
No, it's visiting another planet.
That's the only way to describe that. You can't believe...
It's a place out of time and space.
And their flavors are out of time and space as well, as a consequence, yes.
Well, that is we use the word magic to describe something we don't understand, but that is literally, you can say alchemy, you can say magic, you can say, I mean, a chef does the same thing, a musician. There's a moment you begin to transcend the, I would say, the logical inputs, and something else comes out. And that, what's so beautiful, though, what we were about to say, you mentioned the Campanilla system. That was, again, part of the journey that I took. Of course, I took a journey into the tequila area as well. There's definitely a Guanajuato-style tequila. But they're always the little brother of Jalisco, tequila, Jalisco. And they shouldn't need to be. But that was also a beautiful journey. But then when I got to the mezcal side of the tracks, what's interesting in comparison to Oaxaca is that you have haciendas, and that is where you had the landowners. And what was so interesting is you had much more formal farms. You didn't have such pueblos or kind of indigenous peoples. You had actually organized large estates. And it was the organizers, the hacienda owners, that began to say, okay, this year I want to do some beans and I want to do some corn. And why don't we make some mezcal? But it was always for local use. It was never really for sale, except when you finally really industrialized it. I mean, many people in the past and even today, aside from Monterrey, I would say Guanajuato is the industrialized area of Mexico. And so what you get is 200 years ago, when people were looking at making mezcal, you already had that nature where it's like, well, now I'm going to industrialize it. Like now I'm going to supersize it. And if you would give Guanajuato any credit, you would say that they were the first to industrialize the distillation of spirits in all of Mexico.
I mean, Jaral del Berrio, it's one of the... I mean, I can't remember the numbers out of the top of my head.
Yeah.
It's millions of liters those kids were doing.
Well, the thing is in 1790, and so I just want people to sit with that number. Yeah. 1790, that's more than 200 years ago. The area was producing 10 million liters. And of that, that's 23 distilleries. And of that, Jaral de Berrio was producing 500,000.
So just to put that in context, I think 2024, the whole mezcal industry produced about 12 million liters.
Whoa. So now we're bringing our numbers together. It's nuts.
So before the independence of Mexico, they were like just this region.
Region.
Was making almost the same amount of mezcal that we're doing today.
Yeah. And commercializing it. So what's crazy is not only did they drink it themselves, so, as in true good fashion, you keep the best for yourself, but it was one of the first to be exported to Spain.
Really?
Yeah. So Pedro Valdez Avila Suso, he said that he had a receipt, I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but I believe him, of the sale of the vino mezcal to Spain in 1790.
And I'm sure they never quite publicized that once they got there. They were just drinking there in the house. Yeah.
Well, and so what I think also happened is that what's very interesting, so I mentioned a term, vino mezcal. There is a recipe in that area, and that is where you do one distillation. So of course, for public consumption, for the people, you wouldn't do a second distillation was for the hacienda owner. So 46% was when you had your second distillation, and that was for the local kings.
The fancy.
And they called them, they said it was the pela oreja. So to peel, it was so strong for the people, it peeled your ears off. And so I love that. And this is part of the whole, so when I talk about mezcal in Guanajuato, I say it's hacienda mezcal. Because that's where the money was and where the technological know-how and the technological drive came to industrialize it. I mean, just to bring it back to today or like to the earth, Jaral de Berrio needed 500 burros to bring that amount of piñas in every day.
It's because people, if
you need to like say these numbers so that you see how huge this was.
If anybody decides to go visit Jaral de Berrio, which it's hard to get in there, you need to really sweet talk somebody into that. It'll come back. But I was able to enter the property once. When you see the ovens where they were cooking this,
people. Fit like huge groups of people fit.
It's like a five floor house or a building. It's like there's small buildings that were being used to cook this. And I think this is so relevant because in so many of other mezcal traditions that we get to try, and again, like we're not saying one's better, one's worse. We're just saying like these are two realities that were happening at the same time within this vast country that is called Mexico. Yeah. You had a bunch of the things that people have tried or we've started drinking in mezcal were these more like, let's call them like field distilleries, like small, like tiny, almost household operated, family owned,
but they
like
had
tiny
to be
operations, and they had to be hidden.
So that brings us back to Campanilla. So if you would ask me, most of the mezcal in Guanajuato is Hacienda Mezcal.
Yes.
And then if you keep looking, and then you have to keep digging, and you have to keep crossing the desert, and you have to keep going left where there is no road, that's when you get to the lookout for the village that decides whether to let you in or not, because in the past, they literally have had their livelihood ripped away from them for producing mezcal.
Yes.
So it was surprising to me as someone who comes from the world and, it's 2025, that there still exists to this day a fear in Guanajuato of, can I really share this with you? Is the police going to come and, take my business away? Am I allowed? Women in mezcal as well. Like the two best master distillers that I met in Guanajuato are women. They weren't allowed to be maestra mezcaleras, so they had to have really great husbands to cover for them. It's so beautiful because I think that's the story of Mexico always. And I think there's so much value in everything that's created here because there has been a very deep and long and prolonged struggle. But then when art can come out of it, there's a beauty. And it was so beautiful. I think just the very nature of me meeting them all, and they saw that I valued it and respected it and could see it. And funnily enough, that is what got the relationship and the joy back in Guanajuato, because someone saw them. And I started a bar in San Miguel, in an old building of mine. And because personally for me, I was sick and tired of going to a bar in San Miguel where someone was giving me Bacardi and Coke. It was just like the richness of what I saw. And again, that's the distribution center. I get it. There's structures, but look at me. I'm trying to break the structures down. But what I wanted to do was, when I went there and I saw the art that I was seeing, the single thing that they didn't have, and they had some of the best in the world, even yours were telling me that's just nuts, like how good it is.
No, the flavors are insanity.
Insane. And if you're lucky enough to try them, where are you going to try them? If they don't know you, where your living room is, and they don't know how to find cañada, I tell you, a second part of my agave business started because for all the generosity that I received, I had to give them access to market. That was what I could do. I went to the desert and I brought back the jewels, and I said, at least the world comes to visit San Miguel. I'm going to create a space where people can come try those offerings. And all of a sudden, Guanajuato is coming back on the stage for mezcal because you can drink it. We're talking about it. I'm very lucky to be friends with many of the government ministers. So at a cocktail party, I can kind of elbow him
Have
and
you tried
say,
this? Yeah.
No, but I can elbow him saying, for all the things you do for vineyards, why is no one talking about the distilleries we need to go visit? Oh, you're right, Sophia. Yeah, we should do that. It's
so backwards. it's so
fine.
silly.
It was time sometimes. One just has to trust the time. And I think there would have been too much fear, but it's just when you can earn your business. If your art is mezcal and you can earn your business selling mezcal, there's a part where you finally know as an artist you're being valued.
And I think that another, like San Miguel de Allende, it's one of the places of Mexico that I think are the most popular like these days in the world. I can't remember the number, but it's something insane.
We have 2 million people come a year, but only 100,000 of us live there, or 130 by now.
That is...
Yeah, it's insane.
It's one of the most visited places in all of Mexico. And to think that...
And people with the means to buy.
Exactly. So, and I think that's another critical thing. A lot of the tourism you're not getting backpackers and like kids that are just there to drink blue drinks and make a mess. It's not Spring Breaker Central. It's people that are actually have certain means to buy more specialized stuff and that have the age to appreciate that. Yes. Because, I mean, I don't know how that's going to sound, but probably the average age of the San Miguel de Allende tourist is like 40 and plus, maybe. Or do you have
going down now, but the thing is, it's more about the money. Like if a salmiana, for example, and I think people will be shocked when they hear it, but it takes 40 kilos to produce 1 liter.
So
it has to have the price tag that it does. But that's okay. There's lots of other stuff, and one has to always, I think, stick to the essence of what something is. And Daniel Navarro, I mean, what I always find hard, I think, as being the person in the middle of two groups, the consumers and the producers, is it's too easy for us to forget how things are made and where they come from. But once you visit the cerro, the ecosystem of Guanajuato, and if you imagine a man or a woman needs to walk through that in the beating sun, find the agave, bring it back, and they're 200 kilos each, so you have to chop that up, then you have the saponins, then you come back, then you're preparing it for your oven. I mean, you're talking 2 weeks if you're lucky, and you have to sing to it and watch it, and it's 4 a.m. in the morning. The yeast won't wait. If it's not performing, you got to get in there and bag and whatever you're doing. In Salmiana, with the lowest Brix value of most of them, if you don't know how to sing to the yeast and the agave, that isn't happening. And the whole thing gets thrown out. So there's just all this stuff happening. You tell me that's $150 a bottle? That's cheap, this whole thing of really, but that's what we're doing here, is to really understand the story and the art form. And I think that's what you do so well with your podcast, is just really to show people what's behind these things.
Well, I try, I certainly try, because, it's like, how can we find ways of explaining this in a way that it makes sense to minds that probably are never going to touch these fields. They're probably never going to be physically there. How can this make sense to people that will never in the flesh have contact to this? Which I think many other industries have achieved, right? Like many of the most valuable products in the world, you don't have to go physically there to believe them. Mm-hmm. You just believe them. And I think that's a big part of what we are trying to achieve these days. But yeah, this, it's just impressive how how immaculate, pretty, and exciting this spirit is all in one. Like, it's rounded, but it's not boring. It's intense, but it's not overwhelming. It's very particular. At the same time, it feels familiar. Like, my body's like, yes, this is wonderful. Like, for me, this is like perfection in a cup. And I'm very happy that we got this in the studio.
I'm very happy too. I was very happy when through the collaborations and the friendships that we made, we began to find a way to make an expression. And if, from my point of view, if you would ask me to describe that, and even the essence of distillation, if you truly offer a distillation, you're distilling the essence of an area or of a plant. And what I would love to encourage people is to not just think of the plant in isolation, but really think of the distillation of an ecosystem.
I think like that, if you allow me, that'll be the best possible conclusion for this episode, which is we are not drinking just a plant. We're drinking an ecosystem. And if a spirit is able to communicate that, then it is a successful spirit. If it's not, if the links between the ecosystem and the spirit are not present, then that's the worst version of industrialization. And then I'm sorry,
you could be drinking anything.
Then it's absolute vodka. It doesn't matter where the hell it's done. They can do it in Finland, they can do it in India, they can do it in Mexico. It doesn't matter. There's no links between the final product and its ecosystem.
There's no locality to it.
Yeah. Well, Sophia, it's been nothing but a pleasure, as per usual, to talk to you. And cheers. I hope to see you again very soon in San Miguel or elsewhere.
Yeah, come visit.
Yes, that was a good one.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think it was good. No?
Yeah?
I think we touched.
The only person I didn't mention was her.
If you are as excited as I am about this project, you can definitely go visit it in San Miguel de Allende. Some coordination may be needed, but you can contact Sophia and her fellow associates at Cañada de la Virgen on Instagram. All sounds and music were created by Roy Sierra, and now all the videos living in YouTube are also made by this gentleman. Drink the mezcal and regenerate the land. Nos vemos al rato.